I get stopped in the street like almost every day now by someone. They pull over in their car and they go, dude, I was depressed 3 months ago. Now I'm happy because my knees don't hurt. So that's what I do.
And again, most people buy into this narrative that maybe after 30 or 40 or 50, you shouldn't expect to have non-painful knees. You shouldn't expect to have a non-painful lower back. And then people just talk themselves out of so many things that could give them so much longevity. Subconsciously, people make decisions to avoid or quit certain body movements because of this pain, right? And so we don't even know that we consciously stopped running, swimming, playing with our kids. We might have just, preferred to watch Netflix more and more.
We come to think of pain, like I was educated to think of pain as something that you try to figure out how to mask that pain. You think, okay, what's wrong with me? Maybe it's genetic or this or that. Of course, these are factors, but your body's giving you a signal with that pain. So I look at pain way different now. I look at pain as an opportunity. So how crazy would this sound? I wish my body was full of pain. Wait a second, why? Because I've got over a 40-inch vertical jump. If I still had pain, that would mean I could probably get a 50-inch if I figured out why I have that pain. I see pain as an opportunity. Oh, you're doing this well and you have shin splints? Oh my gosh. You could achieve so much more if you actually figured out and handled the shin splints. So I think of pain, it's a communication your body's sending you. Are you telling your body to shut up, or are you gonna take that communication and figure it out?
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Ben Patrick, AKA the knees over toes guy, the elite American sporting coach who has transformed the lives of thousands of professional and amateur athletes. Your revolutionary knees over toes method uses training protocols throughout the full range of motion to strengthen each muscle and support the core joints. After personally suffering from 10 years of knee pain and undergoing multiple surgeries, you use this same protocol to transform your 19-inch vertical jump into 42 inches, enough to easily slam dunk a basketball, all while being pain-free. As founder of the Athletic Truth Group, you've dedicated your life to helping others with the aim of saving as many people from surgery as possible while enabling them to realize their true physical potential. Ben, welcome to London Real.
Hey, I'm super grateful to be here. I'm going to make sure that this is the best podcast I've done and that it's the simplest so that everyone who listens to it knows exactly what to do by the end.
Fantastic. I love it. And for everybody, just stay tuned, because when we're done having a conversation here and talking about the intellectual property, Ben's actually been generous enough to say he's going to step out to your now famous sunny outdoor gym, and he's going to walk through some 4 basic protocols. So stay tuned for that. This is going to be an epic episode. And Ben, it's fascinating because the more I've been talking to people that you were going to be on the show, the more I realize, Ben, that everybody has knee pain. And it restricts them from doing all sorts of things in their life. And so many people have just resigned themselves that I can't run, I can't ski, I can't pick my kid up, I can't this. It's this narrative in our head. I have lower back pain, where we just almost resign ourselves to no longer be human. And here's this guy, you, coming out, showing us these crazy vertical jumps with these protocols that look simple, and telling us that we can get our knees back and our lives back. It's amazing to see, and I want to go into detail today. And Ben, you've been blowing up this past year. I think there's a rule in marketing. It's called the rule of 7. I don't know if you heard of this, but it says a prospect needs to hear a message 7 times before they take action. And a couple weeks ago, I just said, I told my team, I said, get me this knees over toes guy on the show, because I kept hearing about you from all these different places. And I said, I got to get you on and talk about this. If you had to explain to people right now, what the hell is knees over toes? How do you succinctly explain what you're all about?
Succinctly, short term, it looked like a really good idea for people with knee pain to just avoid putting pressure on the knees. That's also a death sentence long term for your knees. Succinctly, that's what I do. So we've had two different fields evolving, fitness and medicine. They've both been evolving, but two independently. So seemed like a good idea to avoid the knees, maybe get surgeries for the knees, anti-inflammatory drugs, all kind. Actually, there's a lot we can do really simply to strengthen our knees. Your tendons, these things can actually grow and develop and strengthen. So if anyone's ever dealt with a problem and had that aha moment where you realize that short-term running from the problem could lead to long-term disaster, my career's been devoted to that for the knees.
That's perfect. And you said before, I think there's a quote that you said, we confront the motion that hurts, but at the level that it doesn't hurt. So you're all about walking people through, slightly less painful parts of the protocol to kind of bulletproof their knees so you can do things you never thought possible before.
That's exactly right. So I'm only going to cover 4 things today because I think there's only 4 things that really matter. So that makes it simple right off the bat. And number 1 is the idea of walking backwards. So I was always told, don't lay your knees over your toes. Don't lay your knees over your toes. There's not actually science to substantiate that. It just seemed like a good idea. Oh, there's pressure on your knee when it goes over your toes. That would mean you can't walk downstairs. That would mean you can't walk backwards. For anyone who has a mirror nearby, stand sideways, look at yourself in the mirror. Then go like you're going to take 1 step backwards. Backward walking is just knees over toes. Not only has that been done for thousands of years in Chinese cultures to prevent elderly from getting arthritis and cartilage damage. So many people have even seen Chinese elderly out in fields walking backwards. Even in American studies, it showed that walking backwards was alone an effective screening process for falling in elderly, which is one of the leading causes of death and hospitalization, meaning the better you are with your knees over your toes, the more protected you are. But that's 1 of 4 points. And that breaks down into a lot of levels. So for athletes, I'm strapping them up to sleds and seeing, okay, which athlete start the clock for 5 minutes? Which athlete is going to be able to drag that sled farther in 5 minutes? That's just a test of knees over toes. Super safe, low impact, best workout of your life. Cardio, you're even pushing through your toes. Think about flat-footed training. That's not normal either. So by doing knees over toes, we've also found we unlock the door to not having foot pains, Achilles pain, shin splints, because we're having to strengthen through the foot. So that's an example from walking backwards for elderly. 10 minutes is a great workout for elderly. Walk backwards for 10 minutes. Do it somewhere that's totally safe. For athletes, set a 5-minute clock and see how far you can drag a sled backwards. There's no exact weight because different surfaces vary in friction. And I try to live like a non-athlete, like a regular person. So for a regular gym goer, go in, get on the treadmill, don't turn it on, turn around, stick your butt against the handle, and spin the wheel backwards. Thousands of people have gotten knee pain relief who had tried all kinds of, PRP injections, literally from just spinning a turned off treadmill backwards. That's why I'm knees over toes guy, because it was like I was helping myself and so many others. I hated social media, but I knew I had to get the word out. So I went, I don't give a shit if I accomplish anything else. If people understand knees over toes, my career's a success. So I did that 3 years ago. I made knees over toes guy.
And it's so simple, yet so effective. And again, people can watch a bunch of the videos on your Instagram, on your YouTube channel. You can see the backward walks on the treadmill. I haven't tried that yet, but I've gone through a bunch of protocols and we'll talk about them today. You made some important points there. And early on the show, we had Ido Portal on the show, and he was all about human movement. And we did a bunch of episodes. I actually went to Israel and trained with him. We did a conversation where we walked around London. And I remember him saying, pain is something in the Western world that we tend to avoid or medicate, when in fact, it's not necessarily a reason to stop doing what you're doing. And so many things I've done when I've tried different things, whether hanging on the rings or breakdancing, which I started doing years ago. I mean, I did feel some pain and some things hurt. I actually think I was bulletproof in my knees without knowing it, but I'll ask you about that later. But, I pushed through it and I became stronger and better. But unfortunately, I think this narrative that we've come with medicine, maybe in Western, is that we treat it, we mask the pain, right? So you either do more of it or you avoid it. And it seems like we're going the wrong way in so many aspects. Is some of that correct to assume what I'm saying?
Yeah, and first off, I mean, Ito is a legend. Guys like Ito Portal pave a way for guys like me. So there wouldn't be guys like me if it weren't for guys like Ito Portal. So we come to think of pain, like I was educated to think of pain as something that you try to figure out how to mask that pain. You know what I mean? And you think, okay, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? Maybe it's genetic or this or that. Of course, these are factors, but your body's giving you a signal with that pain. So I look at pain way different now. I look at pain as an opportunity. So how crazy would this sound? I wish my body was full of pain. Wait a second. Why? Because I've got over a 40-inch vertical jump. If I still had pain, that would mean I could probably get a 50-inch if I figured out why I have that pain. You see what I mean? So the point is that I see pain as an opportunity. Oh, you're doing this well and you have shin splints? Oh my gosh. You could achieve, so much more if you actually figured out and handled the shin splints. So I think of pain, it's a communication your body's sending you. Are you telling your body to shut up, or are you going to take that communication and figure it out?
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels to other aspects of your life as well there, Ben. We can talk about that later. But, again...
Well, hopefully not. Let's just keep it...
keep it about this. But, honestly, like so many things in life, they're giving you the indicator with pain. You can be with the pain and learn from it, or you can run away from it. But like you said, you can pay me now or pay me later. A lot of people go on this pay me later scenario, which means... maybe you're not getting the most out of your body, you're pushing things way down the line. And again, most people buy into this narrative that maybe after 30 or 40 or 50, you shouldn't expect to have non-painful knees. You shouldn't expect to have a non-painful lower back. And then people just talk themselves out of so many things that could give them so much longevity. And back to just Ito, Ito is a legend. And it was amazing to be with him at the time. And he really was a pioneer in everything that he was doing. And it's nice to see other people, picking up that torch and going further with it. And you bring your own intellectual property, your own story to this. You really blew up over the past year, Ben. And I'm curious as to why you think you have. I know there was a bunch of interesting factors, like you had to shut your gym down from COVID. You went online. You've also got a crazy vertical jump yourself and are slam dunking. You've also got some impressive professional clients that you train, I think, in the NBA. And then also you're online. I mean, can you explain why you become so popular so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I try to base it. I think there's different ways to gain popularity and different ways to gain money. And I just equate it to value. So either it's real value or you're swindling someone into thinking they're getting value. But either way, it is value. And so, I think of it, my phone's off, but what does it say at the top of my notes every day is, how do I bring the most value today? Not what time of day do I post? What hashtag do I do? What blah, blah, blah. My social medias have combined about tripled since the last time I put a penny on ad money. It even took me time to realize if I don't even put a penny on ad money, that's going to force me to provide even more value. I also stopped using any professional athletes to market. I'm training some of the most famous athletes in the world. Some of the most shocking stories people are seeing in sports are guys that I'm training. I don't even use those guys to market because, again, what's it going to do? It's going to force more value. So I was already doing this in person. That's what I was known for in person. I'm a complete psychopath. I've taken, in the last 3 years, I took like half a day off when my kid was born. I don't know how to take a day off. I don't think I'm capable of taking a day off. In person, it was the same way. Going online was the best thing that happened to me because I had a baby. And otherwise, I don't know how I would have been a functioning dad, to be honest. I still can feel and visualize how much my life was ruined by such simple things. You know what I mean? So I look at my life as I'm one little speck on the planet, and there's millions of others of 12-year-old kids about to just go through hell and back in life and ruin relationships and all kinds of things just because of how depressed they are about something like knee pain. So I consider my life is one of duty. It's my duty to get this out there. That's how I operated in person. So that's exactly how I've been online. I simply outproduce and I try to provide more value and help more people. So what's funny is that it's grown mostly by word of mouth from people getting real results and then wanting to share it. I get stopped in the street like almost every day now by someone. They pull over in their car and they go, dude, I was depressed 3 months ago. Now I'm happy because my knees don't hurt, So that's what I do, but I think that's why it's blown up. Joe Rogan mentioned me on his podcast. That's cool. I'm grateful for that. You're giving me this opportunity. Extremely grateful for that. But these don't exist unless I'm actually prioritizing just helping people with value. You know what I mean? So I don't stress probably what most people would stress if they're trying to grow. I don't give a shit about my following or anything else. I could start over tomorrow with 0 followers. It wouldn't change my mood at all. It would probably just fire me up. And I would think, well, shit, I'm going to have to get that much better and help that much more. You know what I mean? So that's my philosophy. It keeps it stress-free. It keeps me motivated every day, because even if I reach a goal, well, that might give me a reason to be complacent. So I'm not goal driven. I'm duty driven and purpose driven. And I'm chasing that next life-changing win for someone.
Yeah, you said you're a psychopath, Ben, and I think I agree. And it's almost like you're scratching your own itch. You're doing this for you. You use these protocols on yourself to bulletproof yourself and get you back to be able to doing what you love, which is play basketball. I heard you say one time that you'd be okay going to prison for 20 years as long as they had a basketball court. So, and you could see it when I listen to you talk to people about your IP, you get into this weird tunnel where you're almost somewhere on the autistic spectrum, man. You go there and it feels like you could talk about this stuff for 72 hours straight, without any help. And that comes out in your videos. You're really into this, you're obsessed with it, you've thought about it, and I can tell you're trying to better communicate it. You're constantly struggling with innovative ways of communicating your IP. Am I seeing this right?
Yeah, exactly. How do I get what's in my head into someone else's head? You know what I mean?
Right.
And that is where I personally believe the closer we get to the truth, the simpler it gets. I believe we should be able to explain things quickly and simply. So I feel like each time I'm a little better and a little more capable. So like today, when we're done, I think I'll be able to show 4 things that probably compared to any previous time I've put it across, more people will be like, oh, wow, that makes sense. I got this now. Now I can go forth in life with that knowledge.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about this knees over toes protocol. Like you said, I remember, I think, being trained in the gym with my personal trainers over the last 20 years. And I'm sure they told me to squat probably without my knees over toes because everyone knows that's bad. And how many other myths were propagated in a place before there was YouTube and social media and people like Ito and people like you and people like Charles Poliquin, who you trained with, who was a guest here on London Real back in 2018, who actually Ito used to quote his name before I had even heard of Charles back in the day. And Charles unwittingly became part of my movie Iron Mind. At the time I was training for an Ironman triathlon and I was doing it on a plant-based diet. And Charles had nothing good to say about that and basically said, I've trained, like, how many Olympians did he train? Like hundreds or something? And
I counted 286 Olympic medalists. It's like by far the most in history.
Yeah, I remember reading that on his intro and I said, that just doesn't even sound right. It was so big. And Charles actually kind of played the bad guy in the movie, the anti-vegan guy. And it was a great part. We dedicated the movie to him and his passing. And I was so sorry to see him go. And I know you trained with him. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what it was like to train with Charles, what it was, and where you got some of these ideas before. I know you've shown pictures of some of these old pictures of strong men where they're holding these kind of like kettlebell looking things behind their back and doing this knees over toes training. And maybe you can talk, because I know Charles had said to you early on how not only should you, but you had to move your knees over your toes when you squatted. So I don't know, maybe fill us in on a little bit of the background, Charles, training with him, and then how some of these ideas started bubbling up in your head.
Yeah, I mean, it started with Charles. Now, like you said, I've always been crazy passionate one way or another, and I wanted to be a basketball player. And I didn't have the height for it, didn't have the genetics for it. Then from 12 to 18, chronic knee pain, surgical alterations. So when I finished high school, when in America you're supposed to get like a college scholarship, I didn't have any basketball recruitment. And I mean, in theory, I should have just like gone into a different field. Somehow in my mind, I still thought I was going to make the NBA, right? So I was this delusional guy, but I wasn't delusional about how good I knew I needed to be. I knew where I was at. There's a difference. You know what I mean? There's a difference between having a big goal, but actually knowing what it'll take to get there. So I started to realize that if I didn't figure out how to bulletproof my knees, that was just going to never happen. And I got to rock bottom to a point where it wasn't even like, it was like, if I could just figure out how to bulletproof my knees to play basketball without pain, then I could just be a happy person. You know, like that was my hobby, even if it means just once a week on the weekend. You know, like I'm looking forward to life going, you know, I'm turning 30 this month. My kid is 9 months old. I'm just happy knowing that as he grows up, I'm going to be able to play basketball with him. You know what I mean? So it got to that kind of level. So then I put aside all the other stuff, and my whole life mission was, how do I bulletproof the knees? And really the first thing, because I was so bad off and I'd already tried every common thing that someone would be told. Charles said, the athlete whose knee can go farthest and strongest over the toes is the most protected. So a light bulb went off. I immediately knew that was true. Now, how do I get there, right? So if someone just tried to do that, they might, you know, maybe they would get hurt in the process. You see what I mean? So I saw that, I heard that. Now, as you know, Charles was older. There wasn't exactly like, it's not like he had videos of the stuff I'm talking about. It was mostly written, right? Written. And there was a guy named Keegan Smith, and a student of Charles. So Keegan had some videos, and I'm watching this intentional knees over toes training. And so really my best blessing was that one of my knees has partially artificial kneecap, replaced meniscus, quad tendon repair. So that means if you look at the knee, it has surgical alteration above the knee, in the kneecap, and below the knee. That's kind of that's a tough trifecta when each below the knee, in the knee, above the knee. But then the other side, I was too depressed to even get surgeries on the other side. I didn't care if I had a limp the rest of my life. So the other side had worse tears, a bunch of different tears. So because of this terrible difference, and not just trying to get through life, but trying to play basketball, getting the clues from Charles, observing Keegan, and then trying to apply it to my own horrible body. Then once I started getting results for myself, what happens? More people want help. 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, you know, like, so then I had to just regress more and more and more until I realized that every human motion's on a scale. It's not I can't do or I can do. You can do anything on some level. So that was a totally eye-opening moment, that everything is on a scale. And so that's what I do now. And yeah, it got me, I ended up getting college scholarships. I was the Florida Scholar Athlete of the Year. I've been 10 years of competing like crazy in basketball without ever having to miss a game, let alone a practice, because of my knees. So I've lived it now, helped tons of other people. But it was that clue from Charles that was so on the other end. It wasn't like, well, your knees can go over your toes a little. No, it was like the athlete whose knee can go farthest and strongest over the toes is the most protected. So it gave me, that's what created this explosion for me. And honestly, I've never looked back. And I was able to study in person with Charles before he passed away. So I was very fortunate because of Charles and Keegan Smith. You know, you could see if it weren't for Charles, I'd be working commercial real estate with my parents.
Isn't that amazing how one poignantly put sentence from a man or a woman with extreme conviction can literally change the course of history? Like, isn't that incredible?
Changed my life.
Right.
It's changing pro athletes' lives. It's changing elderly's lives because of that one statement. Changed my life.
What was it like to be around Charles? He's pretty intense, huh?
He's the most intense person I've ever been around. And I could see why, because you see how I channel this into passion. But for him, now imagine I'm lucky. I get to be in the social media age. I get to have people getting that instant feedback that it's working, blah, blah, blah. In his age, things couldn't spread that fast. Can you imagine how much internal frustration that must have been for him? I can't even fathom how much frustration that had to have been for him. So I got off lucky by comparison. He really had to sacrifice for everyone by sticking to his convictions. You know what I mean? And as you mentioned, there is case precedence if we go back and back. When fitness was kind of new, people didn't know any better, so they just used the body's ranges. There was no concept of don't do anything. You know what I mean? And this actually worked really well. And I don't want to even get too political. I wasn't there, people, but it does appear like they were getting tons of results for military coming back from the war with broken down bodies, fixing them naturally. And that didn't go over well with the medical community. So there is kind of precedence for this. They didn't have social media. They couldn't spread things fast, nor did they know any better. Like if you look at what I'm doing, I have hundreds of physical therapists reach out to me, thanking me, using the drills. So from learning from the history, from learning from Charles, I also do think that I've had a realization that they probably didn't have, which is that no matter what someone's fitness or diet opinions, that's all secondary to treating other people with respect. How you treat other people, the ability to get along, that's the ultimate toughest thing. That's the ultimate ability, the most commendworthy thing. My ability to get along with someone else is more important than any opinion regarding fitness.
That's a fascinating observation. And yeah, Charles was back there in the day training Olympians, training professional athletes. I think he was one of the first even personal trainers there was out there. And he was one of the first guys, I think, actually to charge appropriately for his services, as I'm just remembering back to his episode where he was like, I'm charging you thousands and you're going to pay it. And people started doing that. And but he was intense. I heard his gyms had every piece of equipment under the sun. It sounds like you better pay attention. It sounds like, he made sure you paid attention to him. But like you said, he must have had to stay with his convictions for years while being naysayed and write stuff and then have to wait maybe 5 years, 10 years for his stuff to be proven true. Is that what you remember about Charles?
Yeah, I mean, he was a perfectionist and a genius, and his job usually was to make Olympic champions, and that requires perfection. For me, I just want to play my sport without my knees hurting. That doesn't require perfection at all. So I'm like I'm Charles Poliquin in my yard, figuring out how anyone in the world can afford to do this. You see the difference? So when I was 12 and my knees started killing me, I couldn't have afforded Charles Poliquin. You see what I mean? But I could have afforded knees over toes guy. So I think if we all in business think about what did we need at our worst? How can we be of service or duty to what's truest to us? It kind of makes it simple. And in his case, he was an Olympic coach. In my case, I'm trying to help dads, moms. I'm trying to help regular people. I'm trying to help people in pain. I'm trying to help kids. The money can't stop people from doing it. So funny enough, though, from all that, I actually would still take the simple approach. Like if you look at some of the athletic abilities I'm getting now, I'm actually exceeding, no offense, some of the stuff that Charles was doing. So I actually think that more world records could be broken with an even simpler approach. But that's my philosophy. We're all entitled to our philosophies. And I almost think you get to a certain point where you understand a subject so well that you realize that it's actually the simplest basic things that you can go even farther than if you were to get more complex. But it takes someone like Charles living the whole way through and someone like me going the whole way through and being able to just work it up and down to break out, okay, what actually matters. And I'll show you that stuff at the end.
Yeah, it's funny you say. I think Ido said something similar to me when he first trained me at one of his first 2-day clinics, where he said, look, a lot of people have a tendency to kind of just blast out all of their knowledge of the anatomy and all these pieces, but the real hard job is to try to simplify it into one simple thing to explain it to them. So where they grasp it, they communicate it, obviously, and then they embrace it. Otherwise, there's no point. And I'm bet that Charles is probably looking down with a smile, watching what you're doing right now, which is very different than what he was doing, obviously, with a different landscape, with different kind of media, but also seeing the way you're simplifying it. And again,
And I should mention that too.
yeah,
Super sorry to cut you off, but to make my last statement clear, if Charles is training a 100, let's say a 200-meter hurdler, that means their entire job is to go over a hurdle with a certain leg on a certain curve. That's different than being a basketball player, where I have to go left, right, up, down, back. You see what I mean? So I do think there's a difference there. I'm not saying that I could have done his job better, but I do think from learning from him and him training these really specific Olympic things, I think I was able to figure out for the common person. You see what I mean? For the person who just wants to be bulletproof everywhere, not for like one specific task. Anyways, I wanted to make it clear on that. I don't want to try to say I'm doing it better than.
Understood. And one of those people is your mom, right? She's 65 and she's now internet famous thanks to her son. And you put her up, and she's doing all the body weight, knees over toes stuff. Can you explain to everybody like what's happening there, how she's embraced them, and why it's important that a 65-year-old woman is doing this as well?
Oh yeah, my mom's my most important influencer. I mean, I don't even have any influencers, but my mom is the influencer because, okay, I did all these experiments on myself, yada, yada, yada. If I can't get my mom to be able to do every exercise without pain enjoyably, well, then I'm not doing my job. That's my job. So my mom is my most important client. And she was the proving grounds to find how can you scale every single exercise. So she was just sending me her videos again. And she's working on all these crazy exercises you see me doing, but at her level, at what she can do without pain, enjoyably. So to me, she's like a crucial part of the process because I wanted to be able to help my parents. She had really debilitating hip issues. My personality's like, I'm not going to rest, until we fix that. So we are able to fix that through the power of regressing the exact same motions, but to her level.
Do you think everybody would benefit from these protocols?
Everyone, barring structural defects, which would be, maybe 1% or less, you know what I mean? And even then, there's no telling that it couldn't provide some degree of improvement, right? If I'm working with a 16-year-old with knee pain and he's 6 feet tall, yeah, that guy's going to be able to dunk. If I'm working with an 80-year-old who just wants to be able to go up and down steps, the 80-year-old's not going to dunk, but who's to say that win isn't even more life-changing, right? So it's the degree of improvement is still relative to the person. So like, I haven't seen someone that I would just go like, yeah, you can't do anything about it. It's just a style of fitness where you're addressing your weak points at the level you can handle, and you're reversing the flow. So what in life is coming in at us unnaturally? Human body wasn't designed to be in pain. So now if I go jump thousands of times, which the human body wasn't designed to do that much in basketball or whatever, almost every sport has some kind of overuse action. And you can get miraculous pain transformation just by reversing that action.
What do you mean by that? Explain that, reversing that action.
Simplest way to fix runner's knee is by going backwards. I mean, it's that simple. Simplest way to reduce shoulder pain in someone throwing is to set up a strength system, not of more bench press, but of the exact literally to measurably strengthen the exact opposite of your throw, so that when you put that force in, there's more protection there. But that's the runner's one is a great example. If you watch yourself run in slow motion, anyone could devise a strength system by watching that in slow motion on rewind. Those are the exercises I do to fix runner's knee, is literally running in slow motion, foot plantar fasciitis, shin splints, runner's knee. Watch yourself in slow motion backwards. You just came up with your strength exercises.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm sure everybody watching us right now is now thinking, and I challenge anybody who is right now, as to that one thing that hurts, the one thing that stopped you doing the thing you love, whether it was a foot, an ankle, a knee, a hip, a lower back. I mean, I would argue that everybody has come to that point, whether, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 70 years old, where they've stopped doing something because they thought there wasn't a choice. I mean, am I right in assuming like this applies to probably most people?
Definitely. I would say the majority of people had some kind of physical pain that caused them to stop doing or lessen how much or how intensely they could do some action, whether it's a pro player having to retire because they can't move like they want to be able to move, or whether it's someone just having to give up their sport or stop squatting down to play with their kids. And in every case, you could at least improve it by getting stronger in the reverse of what hurts. So I just feel like that has to be fundamental knowledge, not to run from pain, to use that to signal where you could make an improvement, and then to get stronger, in the reverse of what's hurting.
Okay. Talk to me about sitting. How bad is sitting for all of us? And is this a product to a certain extent of all of our sitting, of even us looking at mobile phones, of, this new lifestyle we've adopted over the past 30, 40 years?
I mean, I think the nature of it, I think we can't assume anything less than it's having a negative effect. It's not natural, right? So we're getting too crouched this way. Our hips are getting really tight. Now, that being said, I just live like a regular person and I sit with whatever posture I want. And I sit tons of hours a day working online. I have, for years typing up programs and articles and this and that. But I'll show you at the end, like I can still do like a front splits cold, meaning like I have elite hip flexor length and stuff like that. So I think you can still live like a regular person as long as you balance that out and you train. So like even my upper body system is almost like just meant to reverse the gravity of too much sitting and too much time on our phones. So yeah, I don't think we can ignore anything that's deviating from what's natural. We're going to have to reverse that out.
Okay, good. And we're going to show some of these protocols. I started doing some of your split squat, or I don't know what you call it, with that you bend the front knee and you extend the back one and you try to get your hamstring to touch your calf with your knee over your toe. That's like your basic maneuver, right?
That's my favorite exercise. It takes some detailed coaching because there's a lot going on at once. But that would almost be like the ultimate exercise to balance out everything that's messing up our hips and knees and ankles. It's like the exact opposite of, every imbalance we're getting in our legs. And I'll definitely show that one.
Okay, good. That's fascinating. I want to hear about that. I started, funny enough, breakdancing about 5 years ago. I actually trained with Ido. I'd gone to Israel with him. I was doing lizard walks and all this crazy stuff with Ido. He was teaching me all things about my body. I'd never really been an athlete, but I had done some things, martial arts and stuff like that. And then I was doing a lizard walk on the ground one day in the gym. And by the way, Ido told me, if you haven't been kicked out of your gym, you're doing something wrong. So, he's all about doing weird stuff anyway. So I was doing a lizard walk down like by the treadmill bank. And I was down there and I had a flashback to some kids that used to breakdance when I grew up in San Diego. And I started taking on this art and learning it. But I remember, Ben, this first year, my knees really hurt. My fingers hurt a lot because you're supporting a lot of weight on your fingers. And but also my ankles were off the ground, so you're on your toes a lot in a squat position and all these things. But I feel like I went through a bunch of your protocols without knowing it, because over a year or two, it got to where everything was much easier and much flowing. And now I could do some crazy stuff that when I post it, people don't even think it's real, but it's because I've been doing it every day and pushing through the pain threshold for, I guess, now years. But I wouldn't be surprised if I'm accidentally going through some of your protocols.
I'm sure that you did. And these human bodies are fragile relative to plenty of other things in the world, but they do adapt. So if we don't kill ourselves off in the process, we can adapt and become more resilient. So like what you did, maybe for one person, they do that and they wind up more bulletproof. Maybe for another person, they tear something. You see it? So that's why, like I said, the first thing we opened up with I said there's just like 4 important things. And one of them is just like walking backwards. Like breakdancing would be like one of those other 4 points, you know what I mean? Of like a full knee bend. So as a more fragile person, some of those things were like too much for me, and they could be too much for others. But there's no telling that if someone had the mental fortitude to push through it, they might be able to do so. Obviously, if you had a breakdancing coach and me we could have figured out the right formula that it wouldn't have had to hurt in the process. And you probably would have actually gotten bulletproof even faster because you have the stimulus you're putting in, but you also have the breakdown. And so a tendon is something that connects a muscle to your bone. And the tendon doesn't get as much blood as the muscle. So it takes longer to recover. So if you tried to break dance every day, maybe the muscles would actually be getting stronger, but your tendons would be playing catch up. So that's my only point. Like, for example, I only train my knee tendons and Achilles tendons 3 days a week, and everyone will see my stuff. Can I do that every day? You could, but why? Why not every other day? Why not give it you see what I mean? So it's all just degrees of how much are you stimulating it to adapt. And if you don't go knees over toes, you're leaving it vulnerable for potential disaster later. So if you are going to do knees over toes training, how much are you stimulating it, saying, I would like more of this strength and this development of the tendons and the muscles, versus how much time do you have to recover? So yeah, I think you did it, and you're probably a person with exceptional mental toughness. And so you made it through. And then you were, I'm sure if we did an MRI, I'm sure that your muscles and tendons were actually thicker and stronger than beforehand.
Yeah, I wouldn't let it go. So I just kept going back. And also it's fun. And it's also, you're learning a skill at the same time. So probably like basketball is for you. For me, I was like, this is fun. And I want to get this one move, and I enjoy it, and I don't want to quit. So I think I did push through some of that and probably unlocked all of this physical ability I didn't even know I had. And that's the thing, I guess, we're not talking about, Ben, is that subconsciously people make decisions to avoid or quit certain pleasurable body movements because of this pain, right? And so we don't even know that we consciously stopped running, swimming, playing with our kids. We might have just, preferred to watch Netflix more and more. And that's a real issue, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what's our purpose here on this planet? Is it to get through life completely unscathed? You know what I mean? Like, so I would take, like, for me, no offense, you probably have a lot of really smart business people watching, no offense, but I would take the ability to dunk over any car in the world and any multitude of the cars.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.